Jynorah and Skorkhif are a pair of bosses found in a new Ossein Cage trial. This encounter was designed by my fellow X-Raider and friend, Style Anima, and boy has she built the monster. This fight is easily the most complex trial encounter ESO has ever released, and also one of the most difficult. In fact, this encounter is so complex that I've organized this guide into several key sections.
Oh, breath on me, breath on me.
It's over. Save your ult.
First off, let's talk about dealing with curses. Curses are arguably the most important mechanic in the fight to learn how to deal with, as they also inflict debuffs that affect how you play almost all other mechanics in the fight. Let's take a quick look at how the curse targeting works. Curses target 10 players and are designed to exclude the 2 tanks. You get 5 curses of each color, and the color a player is assigned is based on proximity to the bosses. For example, given the following diagram, if these icons are the bosses, these are the tanks, the healers, and the 8 damage dealers, curses would be assigned like this. The 5 players closest to the blue boss will be assigned blue curses or sparking curses, and the 5 players closest to the red boss would be assigned red or blazing curses. You can see an example of this in action in the screenshot on the right. Note that on this fight, tanks are not identified by players that have taunt on the bosses, as is typical for most fights in the game. Instead, tanks are identified by a metric that includes the resistances of a player. This was done to counter groups that tried to cheese this mechanic by having healers taunt the bosses. Thus, tanks can sometimes be targeted by curses due to variances because of Ossein procs and other things. If this happens, having your tanks change to tankier specs is something that you should be looking at. Next, let's look at what curses actually do. Curses inflict a 90% healing received debuff on all 10 players. This is pretty typical for a trial-based healing check. For example, Lokesti's Ice Tombs and Yasela Frost Bombs, though instead of affecting 1 or 2 players, this mechanic affects all 10. In addition, players cannot heal players of the same color when the curses are active. For example, if the blue healer on the left here tried to heal the blue group, he or she would do 0 healing to all the blue members. However, if the blue healer attempted to heal or combat Priya to the right group, he or she would be able to heal all the red players, albeit for 90% reduced healing. In the screenshot on the right, you'll be able to see this concept put into action, where you can see both healers are attempting to heal players on the opposing side with opposite curses. Now, this is easily the hardest heal check in the game. To make any progress in this fight at all, first, you're gonna have to learn how to get through this heal check. To help you deal with healing curses, I'm going to recommend 4 major tools that you can use to help deal with these curses. Firstly, have your tanks also be healers. This is practically mandatory. It is very difficult to heal 10 people out of curses with just 2 healers, where each healer can only heal one side. Have your tanks slot as many off-healing skills as possible, as well as a burst heal. Secondly, Major Vitality. Major Vitality is an extremely potent buff to deal with the healing debuff mechanic, because this buff works additively against the heal reduction. For example, for curses, you get a 90% healing debuff, which means that your heals are only doing 10% healing. Major Vit adds 12% to that, which means that instead of healing for 10% of your original heal, you're now doing 22%. This essentially doubles your healing, given no other bonuses. The easiest source of Major Vit would be use of the Nightblade Soul Siphon Ultimate, which hits all 12 group members and also does a significant amount of healing. Likewise, Minor Vitality increases your healing received by 6% and can be provided by options such as Ozazan. Finally, Health Recovery. This has long been a staple stat for use in healing checks as it bypasses healing reductions. Troll King, in particular, is a very strong option for this fight. There are also other ways to obtain health recovery, such as Archaeum food or Bergama Warning Fire food. You can also obtain major fortitude through use of tripods. In this clip, you see me playing a tank role that is set up to off-heal. Before curses hit, I precast my extended ritual, float a healing orb to the opposite group, proc Major Meme on both bosses, and cast Echoing Victor. I then use all my active GCDs during the curse to spam my burst heal, which here is Ritual of Rebirth. Doing this maximizes my healing burst profile for curses, and ensures that when curse hits, my Troll King procs on all the group members. In this other clip, you get to watch how Hickey, our core healer, deals with healing curses. The only note I will make here is that Hickey is using Soul Siphon, which is the only healing ultimate that our group uses for curses. All other supports are using offensive ultimates or Crypt Cannon. Soul Siphon here is mainly just used to proc Major Vitality, as the healing from the ultimate only affects half the group. Next, let's take a deeper look into the damage profile of the curse mechanic. Curses last exactly 5 seconds. When a curse hits, the player receives 85% of his health in oblivion damage. In addition, all shields are removed. At the end of a curse, the player receives 55% of his health in oblivion damage as well. Therefore, for a player to survive a curse, he only needs to be healed to at least 55% of his health before curse ends. That is given that no other damage ticks on the player will immediately tick afterwards and kill him. While curse is active, players also take a small amount of dot damage from malediction every half a second. In addition, if other players stack on a player with curse, they also take a fairly significant amount of damage in the form of something called radiating malediction. Finally, players are immune to all non-curse related damage sources while the curses are active. However, damage ticks can still tick on you right before curses hit or after curses end, which in combination with the oblivion damage ticks can sometimes two-shot you. And if that wasn't enough, curses also inflict some very impactful debuffs that affect all the other mechanics in the fight. After curses end, players get inflicted with a debuff called Enfeeblement, which will last all the way until the next set of curses come out. The type of Enfeeblement debuff inflicted will be the same color as the curse that applied to the player. In other words, if you caught a blue curse, you will get a blue debuff. For example here, we have the in-game tooltip for the Sparking Enfeeblement. This reads, while under this affliction, you deal reduced damage to enemies with Sparking Affinity and take increased damage from their attacks. So, for example, if you have the Sparking Enfeeblement, which is blue, will deal a whopping 95% reduced damage to the blue boss, which is Jynorah here in the logs, as well as all the blue ads. In terms of incoming damage taken, once you are inflicted with a curse debuff, you will also begin to take double the damage from enemies of the same color. These two effects have far-reaching implications on how we play other mechanics like the portal or heat ray phases, which I'll talk about later on. Continuing on, the tooltip reads, your ability to heal or receive healing from allies suffering from sparking enfeeblement is reduced. So the precise value of this healing reduction is 50%, meaning you will halve your healing effectiveness for allies of the same color as well as yourself. Note that this healing reduction is not applied during the active phases of subsequent curses, even though your debuff might not have fallen off. Aside from curses, the enfeeblement debuff can also be applied from enfeeblement circles on the ground.
Horn.
In
No
this
damage
clip,
on Jynorah.
you can see that after curses hit,
Short. No damage on
each
short.
player will drop a curse AoE. Touching these AoEs will give you the enfeeblement debuff for 60 seconds. The other way these circles can drop are from heavy attacks of the bosses on the tanks. You can see here that I've boxed myself in very poorly, and even when I roll dodge through these circles, I still get the enfeeblement debuff. Once I get the debuff, you can see that the boss's attacks almost destroy me, and I'm really struggling to heal myself. Thus, you really want to avoid touching these AoEs at all costs. Alright, now let's put all the things we've learned about the curses together and devise the positioning and movement patterns for the group. First off, as curses are about to hit, you want the members of each side to kind of hug your own bosses, since if you recall, curses are assigned by proximity. However, you don't want too much overlap between players, as that means you just take extra damage via the radiating malediction mechanic. Thus, you can kind of see here that we have deities stacking in stacks of 2 and 2 on each side. Once curses go out, every player should immediately unstack to their positions to avoid overlaps during the curse. After all players are healed through the curse, notice that the blue side deities are on the blue boss and the red side deities are on the red boss. This is a bad thing, as if you remember, you only do 5% damage to the boss of the same color. Thus, we now have all the cursed players swap sides and then resume damage on the opposite bosses. If and when we get another curse, we now simply repeat the whole process again, where we hug the bosses for curse targeting, we then get assigned curses, spread to avoid overlaps, and after curses are healed, we swap sides again. Let's see this in action. Here you can see as curses go out, deities are stacking 2 and 2, and then spreading out, dumping their curses off to the side,
barrier in 3,
and then swapping
2,
to the opposite boss.
Blocking.
Lastly, let's briefly talk about healing formations. This formation that you see, which our healer Icky Piggy came up with for our group, is specially designed so that each healer can isolate their healing to the opposite group. This is important because almost all healing skills in a game have a target cap of 6 players. For example, if you were to come up with a formation like this to try to fit all 10 cursed players within the healing springs of both healers, this would actually backfire on you. Let's say you're the blue healer. Even though your heals do 0% healing to all players with the blue curse, that does not mean your heals will not attempt to target them. Given that your healing skills can only target 6 players, you might end up essentially wasting some of your heals on targets you can't actually heal. Another example. Given a formation like this, while both healers can isolate their springs to members of just the opposite group, their combat prayers will likely always include a member of their own group as well as themselves, which could cause some members from the opposite group to not receive healing. Note that this healing targeting behavior of curses is true as of the release of the chapter.
Ossein Cage.
And that's it. We've finished talking about curses and officially completed the first section of our guide. We're going to be talking about a really unique feature only found in this fight next, which involves these two dragons. This fight features two dragons, or titans, as the game calls them. These titans cannot be damaged by players or taunted. They actually reflect all player damage done to them. However, these titans can damage each other, and they can also be damaged by other adds and mechanics. At any point of the fight, if one of the titans die, the other titan will turn its attention to the group and perform a raid wipe mechanic. Thus, one of the key focus areas of this fight is to ensure that the titans are kept alive. There are various mechanics you have to contend with to keep these titans alive. In order of descending priority, these mechanics include controlling the Titanic Clash, blocking heat rays, soaking seeking surges, and managing adds. Now let's talk about these mechanics one by one. This fight will always have two portal phases, during which Titanic Clash will occur. This happens when the total health of the bosses reach 75% and 35%. During these portal phases, you can see that the titans are beaming each other, kinda like Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort here. The titan that loses this clash will suffer a significant amount of damage, half or more of his total health. In the bottom right corner of my screen, you can see a panel that tracks in real time the health of the titans. This comes from the Ossein Cage helper add-on that I authored. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2. Each titan has 242 million health, which sounds like a lot. However, each Titanic Clash phase, if not properly played, does 194 million damage each time. This accounts for 80% of a Titan's health. However, if you play the mechanic correctly, Titanic Clash only does 121 million health, which accounts for exactly 50% of a Titan's total health. I'll explain more about how to do portals later on, but for now, just know that to reduce the Titanic Clash damage done, you need to help the ad that is shielding the losing Titan. You'll see here that this blue-colored aspect is attempting to shield the Titan, and when that happens, this other elite ad on this platform will attempt to interrupt the aspect. All you have to do is to bash that ad, then escape from the platform using the portal on the side. If you do this correctly, the Titan gets a 70 mil damage shield and will only take 50% of its health in damage. Note that since each Titanic Clash will do at least half of a Titan's health in damage, the same Titan cannot lose a clash twice. You can control which Titan loses the clash by adjusting the damage on the bosses. Whichever boss has the lower health when a portal phase occurs will trigger the same colored Titan to lose the clash. For example, here you can see that the blue boss, or Jynorah, had lower health during the first portal phase, and the blue Titan lost the clash. Thus, to make the red Titan lose the next clash, the group needs to put more damage into Skorkhif and bring him lower than Jynorah before the next portal phase occurs. 3, 2, 1.
Nobody beam Jynorah, just beam Skorkhif. It's Slayer now.
Yeah.
Assuming you do the Titanic Clash mechanic correctly, and also get different Titans to lose each phase, you should have 50% health remaining on each Titan to deal with the remaining mechanics that we're going to talk about. Next, let's talk about the heat ray mechanic. Heat rays start happening after the first Titanic Clash phase, typically after the first curse goes out. One of the bosses will summon an aspect at the edge of the arena nearby that will attempt to shoot a heat ray at the Titan of the opposite color. When this happens, at least 3 players need to stand in the heat ray to block and reduce the damage being done to that Titan. In addition to that, the player in the heat ray closest to the aspect will have enfeebling AoE spawn under them. We typically assign this job of hugging the aspect and then cutting the AoEs to a healer in our group. In the last section, remember when I said that players receive double damage from enemies of the same color as their curse debuffs? Thus, for this blue heat ray, players with the red debuff need to block it, as the blue players would simply get nuked. Here you can see Caps has the blue debuff, so he's calling for the red players to block the heat ray.
Red team is blocking behind.
Rensu crypt in 3, 2, 1.
In terms of damage done to the Titan, a heat ray does 7 ticks of damage once every second. If the heat ray is blocked with 3 or more players, it will do about 1.2 million damage per second, or a total of 8.5 million damage to the Titan. This actually accounts for just 3.5% of a Titan's health. However, if no one blocks the heat ray at all, the damage skyrockets to a staggering 36 mil damage per hit. Over 7 seconds, that equates to 254 million damage, which is actually more than the health of a Titan. In other words, unblocked heat rays will nuke a Titan from 100 to 0. Given that each Titan will lose at least 50% health due to Titanic Clash over the whole fight, missing blocks on just a few ticks of the heat ray can easily mean the difference between a clear and a Titan death causing a wipe. Another thing I will mention is that heat rays will clear any existing enfeebling AoEs in its path when it starts. We also usually send all 5 players of the correct color to block the heat ray. That way, if one of the players gets a surge mechanic, they can simply step out of the heat ray and kite the surge, which prevents the waves from hitting the group while heat ray damage is ongoing. Next, let's talk about seeking surges. When Atronachs die on this fight, they drop an AoE that gradually homes in towards one of the Titans. If these AoEs reach the Titans, they do a significant amount of damage to them. To prevent that from happening, a player needs to simply walk over the AoE and soak it. The player soaking the AoE simply gets a small 1.5k dot that lasts about 10 seconds. In terms of damage done to a Titan, these Seeking Surge attacks put a dot on the Titan that hits for about 3.2 million damage a second for 9 ticks. In total, this would come up to 29.2 million damage, or 12% of a Titan's health. This is pretty substantial. Of particular note, on each Titan platform, there will be 2 Atronachs that would normally be parsing on the Titans. If you do not kill these Atros and soak your AoEs, like we're doing here, they will actually kill themselves by reflective damage from the Titans and let loose 2 Seeking Surges on them. This would wipe out a quarter of the Titan's health. And finally, let's talk a little about ads. My core recommendation to the tanks for most groups would actually be to ignore these ads during the main fight. They used to do more damage to the Titans on the PTS, but were nerfed, and now exist to provide a very soft DPS check on the fight. If you decide to taunt them during the main fight, note that they are fairly tanky and can do some annoying AoE attacks and stuns into the group. They also have breath attacks that inflict unpurgeable slows, which can be deadly if it happens right before transitioning to portals. I recommend simply taunting these ads as portal phases begin, as some of their attacks can one-shot DDs. Note that also, ads next to the Titans get stunned from them taking flight when the portal phase begins, but ads on their way to a Titan will not get stunned and can instantly turn around to swipe someone when the Titans fly up. And that's really it for this section of keeping the Titans alive. At the conclusion of this fight, if you look at the OCH panel on the bottom right, you'll see that we'll end the fight with the Titans having 30 to 40% health remaining. Given that 50% damage is guaranteed from Titanic Clash, we've only really lost 10 to 20% health dealing with all the other mechanics in the fight. Sure, Genesis does this fight really quickly, but there should be more than enough health to spare for most groups if you execute all the mechanics correctly. In this next section, we're going to talk about the portal phases. As I mentioned before in the previous sections, the portal phase or Titanic Clash phase occurs twice. The first when you push the overall health of the bosses to 75%, the second at 35%. The portal phases, just like everything else in this fight, are fairly complex and have a few mechanics that require group-wide coordination. Let's dive into them.
No.
First off, let's do a high-level overview of how the portal phases will go. As we push the bosses past the 75% threshold here, you can see that the bosses will teleport away. When that happens, a portal on each side on the arena lights up. Above each portal, you will see a pair of torches that signify what type of portals they are. The locations of these portals are random each time. After you take the portal synergy, you get ported to one of the 4 floating islands around the arena. As we go up, you can see that the 2 Titans are standing on opposite platforms, beaming at each other, which is the Titanic Clash mechanic we've already talked about before. On the other 2 platforms without Titans, there will be a big channeler ad standing in the middle. The main goal of the team sent to the channeler portals is to kill both channelers. Killing the channelers unlocks this sealed wall you see right here. This wall will only appear on the platform with the Titan that will lose the Titanic Clash. When Titanic Clash hits, everyone that remains on the island gets one shot. So before that happens, the team on the losing side needs to be able to escape this island. They will wait until to bash this elite trying to interrupt the aspect shielding the Titan, like we talked about before, run through this unsealed passage, and escape using a portal at the end. This puts them at the opposite platform with the winning Titan. After Titanic Clash concludes, all players jump down into the main arena again. Let's now go into a little more detail of what's actually inside these different portals. As mentioned, there are 4 portals, one on each side of the room. Above each portal, you'll see 2 torches that denote what type of portal it is. If there's only one torch lit and it's red, I'm going to call this portal Red 1. Likewise, we have Red 2, Blue 1, and Blue 2 portals. In each of the portals with one lit torch, you have a channeler ad. These channelers are not colored, thus both red and blue cursed DDs can do full damage to them. The portals with 2 lit torches will have a Titan each. But as you can see here, the blue Titan is in red 2, and the red Titan is in blue 2. You might be thinking that this is kind of odd. However, what the color of the portals are showing are actually the color of the other ads in the portal. So for both red 1 and red 2, you would have red ads, and for blue 1 and blue 2, you would have blue ads. For reasons I'll go into later, these ads will need to be killed. With that in mind, let's now try to assign players to these portals in a reasonable way. Here's our 4 portals, and the ads these portals contain. On the left, we have our 10 cursed players, 5 red, 5 blue, and the 2 tanks. In the first section we went through on curses, I mentioned how players with the curse debuff will only do 5% damage to ads of the same color, and also take double the damage from them. Thus, as a first step here, I'm going to assign 2 blue DDs to each of the red portals, and 2 red DDs to each of the blue portals. What's left now is to assign the 4 supports, and each of them should go in a different portal to provide healing and support for the DDs. What my group Genesis does is we assign healers to the channeler portals and tanks to the Titan portals. The reason behind this is mainly historical. On the PTS, the tanks needed to take the elite ads to prevent them from doing too much damage to the Titans. However, the ad damage to Titans have been significantly nerfed since then, and we actually no longer need to tank them. Thus, it can also make sense to swap the healers and tanks around like this. The tanks can go into the channeler portals, the tank can breach the channelers, while the healers go into the Titan portals, because DDs may take extra damage from reflective damage from the Titans. There are also other creative ways you can come up with to do portal assignments, so it's really up to you and your group to decide what works best for you. This time, let's check out some footage from Caps to see what a DD does in the portal. I'm also going to use this chance to talk about another key mechanic you have to deal with in portals, the Caustic Carrion dot. The instant a player enters a portal, he gets inflicted with a dot that deals oblivion damage as a percentage of max health every 2 seconds. This damage ramps and will kill a player when it reaches 6 stacks. Caustic Carrion is actually present in all portals throughout the trial, but ramps more quickly on this boss. Since the Caustic Carrion will kill all players in the portal after ramping the 6 stacks, to survive the portal phase, players need to reset their stacks. You do this by finding and killing a glowing ad in your platform. This ad drops a Carrion Shield synergy, which when synergized, resets the Carrion stacks for all players on all platforms. Since each of the 4 platforms will only have one Carrion Shield synergy, the 4 portal teams need to work together to space out the taking of these synergies. Let's go back to before the portal phase begins. Notice here that even though the portals are open, we're not taking them right away. This is because any player that enters the portals first will start building personal Carrion stacks sooner. This desyncs them from the stacks of other players. Thus, we usually wait and go in together on a countdown.
Gonna go up in 3, 2, 1.
If we wait to go up until right before the main arena is superheated, notice here that when we enter the portal, there's about 34 seconds left until the Titanic Clash occurs. The Caustic Carrion dot will persist for about 4 seconds after the clash, which means that a portal phase lasts typically around 40 seconds. I'm going to draw a timeline here to depict the portal duration of 40 seconds. Given that you have 4 portal synergies, the safest option to space them out would look like this. The green lines indicate the points in time you would use the portal synergies, which would be every 8 seconds. This would allow for the Caustic Carrion dot to only build up to 4 stacks between the resets, and then build up to 4 stacks again before the portal phase ends. Let's now take a look at a POV from Icky so you can see how channeler portals look like. Let's also listen in on the comps.
Going up in 3, 2, 1.
Grabbing first.
Grabbing second.
Grabbing 3rd.
Don't ult Jynorah. Died last. No ults on Jynorah.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. One last thing I will note about the positions of portals is that although they are random, the relative order of the portals are not. For example here, in clockwise order from the top of the portals are red 1, red 2, blue 1, and blue 2. This sequence will always stay the same. Another example would be a configuration like this. Clockwise from the right, this is still red 1, red 2, blue 1, and blue 2. This enables you to tell at a glance in any direction where a portal should be. The 1s are always opposite each other, and so are the 2s. The 2 portals are always right of the 1 portals of the same color, looking on from the middle. And that's it for portals. In closing, I will mention here that if you are wondering how we're getting alerts on which portals to go to, like right here, that's enabled from the portal helper of my Ossein Cage helper add-on. All you have to do to enable it as a DD or healer is to simply go into the settings, enable it, and then select whether you're going into the dragon or channeler portals. That's it. The add-on should then look at your curse debuffs and tell you which portals to go to. This is pretty helpful when you get a dynamic number of curses during the first 2 phases. In this final section of this guide, I'm going to talk about boss positionings and general strategies. This is the most open-ended part of this guide, as strategies will evolve over time. A lot of groups approach this in different ways, so after telling you the basics, I'm going to focus mainly on how my group, Genesis, does it, and the reasonings behind it.
Move.
Before we delve into the details, I'm first going to cover a few Titan mechanics that make it such that you're required to play away from the Titans. The primary mechanic that makes it basically impossible to play the fight next to the Titans is the reflective scales mechanic. Every tick of damage you deal to the Titans can send a reflective scale back at you. This does oblivion damage. Blocking does not reduce the damage, but you can roll these. This can occur at a max rate of once per second from each Titan. Titans have also other mechanics that make it annoying to play next to them. They have tail slams that stun and do AoE damage, and can also stomp and send out waves. In addition, if you are cursed, all attacks from the same colored Titan will do double damage to you. Now let's take a look at the Titanic Leap, which is the mechanic where the Titans jump to new positions. Titanic Leap occurs a few seconds into the start of every phase, and about every 48 seconds thereafter. If we had the bosses at the sides of the arena like this, when Titanic Leap occurs, the Titans would pick a random boss to jump on. Titans can land in various patterns. They can land vertically stacked like this, side by side like this, side by side leading to the other side, and so on. This is random and can happen when landing on either boss. However, after landing on one boss, during the next Titanic Leap, the Titans will alternate jumping to the other boss. The landing configuration here is also random. In the final phase of this fight, Titanic Leap gets some extra mechanics that make it a lot more difficult to deal with. In Execute, whenever the Titans land, they now leave huge AoEs on the floor that serve as a space denial mechanic. These AoEs last for about the next 2 Titanic Leaps. The presence of these AoEs and the randomness of the Titanic Leap positions can force your positions in Execute to become dynamic. That, combined with the fact that the bosses will explode in Portal Way if brought too close to each other, can make dealing with extended executes very hairy indeed.
Oh, come up a little bit forward, come behind me. Oh my god, stop moving.
Oh my god.
I'm going to now show you a clip of a full fight from Genesis while I commentate on it. To start here, we pre-buff on the bosses while allocating some extra pre-buffs to one side to try to ensure that the same boss always gets pushed first. The bosses are brought close enough so that VMA bow pre-buffs, eyes, and Destros get hit both. Once we transition, the first curse goes out. Just for the first curse, we intentionally drop the curse AoEs right where we are, as deities can still do full damage to both bosses until the first curse ends. So we want them to be able to beam both bosses here. After this, we do the first portal phase.
Going up in 3, 2, 1.
As this portal phase ends, you will be able to hear Super calling for the DDs to delay their ults on the boss that is lower. These DDs would swap sides after curses go out and drop their ults on the other boss that needs to be brought lower.
Grabbing 3rd.
No ults on Jynorah. Do not ult Jynorah.
As portal phase
God
ends,
last.
I count down the jump from the portals so some DDs don't jump down early, which could bring the bosses out of their stun lock animation sooner. We then bring the bosses back to the original entrance stack and burn them there for a few seconds. After Titanic Leap occurs, we go across the room to the same stack as the first curse. However, for every curse from here onwards, we adopt an edging strat where we dump all curse AoEs off to the side. This allows us to not move the bosses to the sides or towards the Titans, and gives us a lot of free space to play the fight mechanics correctly. It also allows us easy access to block the heat rays wherever they occur. Edging the curses like this requires high group coordination and strong healing, as you need to ensure everyone gets topped off 1 to 2 seconds before the curses expire so they can run out and dump the curses. As the second Titanic Leap of the phase occurs, the group moves back to the entrance side and prepares for a second set of curses. Genesis typically has enough damage to skip this second curse,
was
but
actually
if we
really
get it,
close.
it really doesn't change the fight
Gonna go
that
in-
much.
In 3,
All that would
2,
happen is that
1.
players would need to go in different portals based on whether this second curse occurs or not, which is where the portal helper feature of my add-on comes in handy.
Grabbing first.
As we do this portal phase, notice that while controlling the boss's health for Titanic Clash, we actually don't want too big of a disparity between the two bosses' health. After the first curse, basically every DD can only
Grabbing
damage one
third.
boss from then
Now.
onwards. Having a
Ults
big
on
disparity
Skorkhif,
going
do not
into
ult
execute
Skorkhif.
actually makes execute longer and a lot
AOS.
harder. In the final execute phase, for Genesis, very little actually
There's no sec.
changes in terms of boss position, because we've
Slayer
optimized our
3,
strats to
2,
maximize damage uptime on
1.
the bosses. Some groups at this point decide to pull the bosses to the corners so that the first Titanic
Do
Leap
not ult Skorkhif.
AoEs get placed in a corner. But since we expect to kill the bosses
Edging
after
once you're
one
healed.
Titanic Leap phase, we don't do that here.
Go now.
If for whatever reason we get a second Titanic Leap
Barrier
in
in 3,
execute,
2.
what we do
1.
is simply dynamically move to an
Rip.
empty spot in the arena, like I showed in the previous clip. When we move the bosses like that,
Yep.
we also adopt something we call a swing maneuver to ensure the boss pathings do not crisscross
Slayer ults.
lest they
Kevin already.
enrage. Since the
Watch the
Titan
breath.
breath attacks go on a random tank in execute,
Finish.
we also have the tanks try to bait the breath in the middle by standing between the bosses. This allows the DDs to simply back away from the bosses and keep beaming.
Barrier.
And that's it.
Bomb and archer.
I hope that this guide was informative for you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section or ping me in the ESO Nexus Discord. See you in the next one.
Just finish it. Finish it.
Sunbeam. Sunbeam.
Don't.
Get that screenshot quick, please.
Alright, hurry up.
Good shit.